Welcome to Animal Stories for Kids. If you like our stories, please give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to our podcast, and share it with your friends and family. Plus, check out exclusive show-related content and join the community at patreon.com/Animal Stories for Kids. And now, it's time for our story. Once upon a time, there was a bark beetle named Keith. Keith the bark beetle lived in the deep, shadowy woods where the fir trees stood tall and proud. Keith was small, but he had something special that made him stand out. He was a super sniffer. Not just any sniffer, mind you. Keith the bark beetle's smelling power, which was actually from a set of antennae, could smell a sick tree from miles away. While other beetles zipped around in random directions, hoping to find lunch, Keith would pause, twitch his antenna once, twice, sniff, sniff, and zoom straight toward a tasty target. One breezy afternoon, Keith the bark beetle caught a whiff of something extraordinary. "Whoa," he said to himself. "That smells like a juicy, perfectly sick and weakened fir tree with bark just soft enough to chew. It's my dream tree." And off he went, zigzagging through the woods until he found it. A grand old fir tree with thinning needles and tiny patches of reddish bark, just the way bark beetles liked it. Keith circled around it, admiring the tree from all around and deciding where to attack from. Then, he found the perfect spot and he dove into the bark and started chewing his way inside. He crunched, he chewed, he wiggled, munched, and tunneled. Keith the bark beetle was in bark beetle heaven. He began to make a cozy little gallery or an open space to hang out in under the bark, inside the wood, perfect for other bark beetles to lay eggs and perfect for inviting friends to join the feast. Bark beetles do that. They call out with special smells called pheromones that say to the other bark beetles, "Hey everyone, this tree has a lot of food for us. Come have an eating party with me." Soon, other bark beetles joined in, and together they carved tiny winding hallways all over the tree's inner bark. It was like a miniature city inside. But not everyone was thrilled. Way up in the branches, a red-tailed hawk ruffled its feathers and glared down at the tree. "Why is my tree getting sick?" it squawked. "I nest here every spring." Below, among the roots, a deer mouse poked its head out from under a rock. "Where are my seeds?" it squeaked. "This tree drops the best seeds, and now it looks like it's sick." The red-tailed hawk and the deer mouse, and even a few annoyed squirrels, began to gather around, staring at the once proud fir tree, now dotted with a whole bunch of tiny holes all over it. And right in the middle of it all, Keith the bark beetle popped his head out of a bark crack and waved a little leg. "Hi," he called cheerfully. "Welcome to the eating party in the forest." The red-tailed hawk glared. The deer mouse was upset. The squirrels were waiting for an explanation from the bark beetles. "This is not a party," said the mouse. "This tree is home. It gives me food, and now it's sick." Keith blinked and said, "But it was already sick and weak. That's why I picked it. Bark beetles only go after trees that are stressed or injured or old." "That may be true," the hawk said, fluttering its wings. "But your chewing makes it worse. If this tree dies, then I'll have to find another nesting spot, and that takes a lot of time." Keith the bark beetle frowned and thought of what to do. I didn't think about that," he said softly. I just sniffed something good and got excited. I didn't mean to mess things up. The deer mouse looked up at him and asked, Can't you move your eating party somewhere else? Keith the bark beetle sighed and said, It's hard to find a good tree. We need one that's already struggling and dying. And this one is so tasty. But just as he said that, Keith caught another scent. A faint, woody smell carried on by the breeze. He tilted his head a little and sniffed again with his antenna. Huh? Wait a second. That smells like... And he took off, antenna twitching. The hawk and the deer mouse watched him zip through the forest like a beetle on a mission. Soon, Keith the bark beetle returned, buzzing with excitement. I found it, he yelled. A stump. A beautiful, barky, already dead fir stump by the creek. It's damp and soft and practically begging for beetle tunnels. It's a bark beetle's dream come true. The deer mouse blinked and asked, A stump? Keith nodded and said, Yup. No living roots to worry about. No critters relying on it for food or nesting. It's just there. And best of all, he paused for dramatic effect, I can tunnel as much as I want, and no one gets hurt. The hawk smiled a little and said, Well, that actually sounds perfect. The deer mouse grinned and said, And our tree gets to recover and get better. Maybe it'll drop seeds again next season. Keith the bark beetle was so happy, and he said, Well, then it's settled. I'll take the party to the stump. And he scurried off, zipping through the air. And before long, all the other tiny bark beetles followed Keith. One of the other bark beetles said, Nice gallery space. Another one said, Oh, this bark is soft. Still another one said, Keith, you did it again. A few months went by, and back at the fir tree, the deer mouse found fresh seeds falling gently to the ground. It scooped them up happily. Above, the red-tailed hawk fluffed its feathers and settled into its nest, safe and sound. And deep in the stump by the creek, Keith munched and tunneled, feeling proud, not just because he found a perfect new home, but because he had listened to others, cared for what they said, and made things right. He may have been small, but his choice had helped the whole forest. The fir tree was now growing strong again. The deer mouse now had more seeds to gather, and the red-tailed hawk could rest high above, wings tucked in peace. On one evening, snuggled deep in the soft wood of his new stump, Keith closed his eyes with a full belly and a full heart. He didn't need cheers or thanks. All he needed was the quiet feeling that he had done something good. And under the bright glow of the moon, all the creatures in the forest rested peacefully, knowing that even the smallest of creatures can make the biggest difference. And the bark beetle lived happily ever after. The end. The bark beetle is a tiny kind of insect that belongs to a big group of beetles called Scolytinae. A long time ago, scientists thought bark beetles were in their own group, but now they know bark beetles are part of the weevil family, just like beetles with long noses. Most bark beetles like to live and eat under the bark of trees, and that's why they're called bark beetles, but some of their relatives do different things. Some of them dig into wood, some eat fruit or seeds, and some even live in small plants instead of big trees. Most bark beetles are smaller than a grain of rice, and there are thousands of different kinds of bark beetles all over the world. Bark beetles have super sniffers on their heads called antennae. They can smell trees with their antennae from far, far away. They sniff out sick or weak trees to live in. And they also use special scents or smells called pheromones to tell their friends, "Hey, come to this tree." Bark beetles love pine, fir, and spruce trees the most. They mostly pick trees that are already sick or dry or broken. If a tree is healthy, they fight back by making sticky sap to trap the beetles. Bark beetles chew through bark and make twisty tunnels. These tunnels are called galleries, and they're like beetle hallways or places for beetles to hang out in. Mother beetles lay eggs inside the tunnels. When babies hatch, they chomp away too, which can hurt the tree. Too many beetles can stop trees from getting water and food. Right under the bark of trees is a special layer called phloem. This layer of trees is kind of like the tree's drinking straw, which helps it move food and sugar and water from the rest of the leaves to the rest of the tree. When bark beetles chew into the bark and start making their twisty tunnels in the phloem, when there are too many of these tunnels, the tree can't move its food because the phloem layer starts to dry out and get sick, and this can even cause trees to die. This means the tree can't move the food or water, and its leaves turn brown, and it might fall down or just dry up. Woodpeckers love to eat bark beetles, and so do other bugs like ants, spiders, and even bigger beetles. People sometimes set traps or bring in friendly bugs to help stop these beetle takeovers. Even though bark beetles can be harmful for trees, they can also be helpful for trees in the forest by breaking down old or dying trees. By doing this, they make space for new trees to grow. Their tunnels also give home to tiny bugs and mushrooms. Birds like woodpeckers and owls often find food near bark beetle tunnels as well. Bark beetles can be found in forests all over the world, and you can really find them in North America, Europe, and Asia. Bark beetles like cool mountain forests, but they also live in warm places too. Have you seen a real-life bark beetle before? If you have, where did you see it? If you want to write to us, ask your parent to email us at animalstoriesforkids@gmail.com and tell us what you think of our stories. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for listening to Animal Stories for Kids. If you like our stories, please give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to our podcast, and share it with your friends and family. Plus, check out exclusive show-related content and join the community at patreon.com/animalstoriesforkids. Until next time, bye!